On this computer. All right, Caleb, are you game to kick us off?
Yeah, that sounds good, and I will totally take your suggestion. Do we have any notices?
Caleb yet?
Can you hear me now? I have a
Hi,
little
Bob.
green. I have a little green bar.
I can hear you.
Okay, great, cool. Well, all right. So some of you can hear me. Do we have any notices or anything
Are
we
others
need to?
hearing Caleb? Because so far I am
Yeah,
not.
I can hear.
Yes. Okay. Well, then this is me. Great.
Great. So do we have any notices or anything else we'd like to put on the agenda before we get started? Does it sound like it?
I'm not so maybe I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the notes right now, but I have a governance proposal to throw into the hopper, perhaps at the end when we talk about the other governance topics.
I have audio now, and Bob, you were added to the line item for Governance MD, Elders MD, and the 3 branches proposal. So we're good there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. And thank you, Caleb, for kicking us off and getting started. So have at it. Now I can hear you all, and I'm going to just step back quietly.
Cool. Well, we can start with the releases. If you're still not, we're still waiting for Brendan?
Yeah, I don't see him yet.
Okay, then let's go right into releases. We'll start with 1.6 and Ehor. Give us a brief recap of the 1.6 feature recap.
Yeah, I have the brief update. Sorry, I'm joined from my Android device, not from the laptop, so I can share the screen. So we had a brief recap a few minutes ago. We finished that with 1.6 features. We have started reviewing the features, and also I have pasted the link to the spreadsheet with 1.6 features in the Kubernetes community meeting. We have approximately 40 features for this release that are targeted in 1.6. You can find them all in the spreadsheet that reflects the actual state of the features repo. As the brief summary, we have most of the features that are related to SIG storage and SIG scheduling here. At the same time, this list can be not final before we'll complete review within the PM group, the actual status of that.
You were breaking up a little bit there. I think the bullet points are around 40 issues proposed for the 1.6 milestone. The PM group met just before this meeting. We talked about most of the issues for SIG storage, and we talked about some of them for SIG AWS and SIG scheduling. We will be doing another meeting Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time to talk about cluster lifecycle and any remaining SIGs we did not cover in the last meeting. I will be uploading a link to the meeting for the last meeting as soon as that's done, converted, and uploaded to the YouTubes. Do we have Dan on the call? We should talk about the 1.6 release. Dan, are you here? Let me ping him.
I don't see him on the named lists. Caleb, do you know if all the release team positions have been filled?
I'm looking at that now. We have features filled. We have release branch. Thank you again to Anthony. We have docs, bugs. We are looking for the testing lead, manual upgrade lead, automatic upgrade lead, and secondary positions for all roles. And we're also looking for a secondary release manager, who I guess is de facto me. Or SOD. So if you are interested in joining, please email kubernetes-release@googlegroups.com or kubernetes-release@coreos.com or ping us on Slack if you would like to volunteer. And we all the roles are super important, and if we do not fill them, it will be much more difficult to get the release out. So if you are excited for a release, please help, especially with manual upgrade testing. That's something we always need help with.
And issue triage, which Justin Garrison had also volunteered to do some help on, but we can always have more people helping with issue triage.
Yep, and here, let's see if I can make these cells protected. Let's see. I want to like black out these phone numbers. But there's a spreadsheet for volunteering. I won't link that in because it's got some private information. I think it's already been linked, but that's okay. So yes, if you're interested in filling any of those roles, please reach out and we will get you set up. We can go to 1.5. Sarah, do you hear?
Yes. So 1.5.3 was initially planned for 2 weeks from now, February 10th, which would be almost exactly a month since the prior release. But it looks like we may have to cut earlier. There are some issues that are currently pending, so it may be as early as next week. I'll keep the Kubernetes dev list updated.
Okay, fantastic. I did see that there was going to be no 1.4 release updates this time around, so we can go into your demo, Brendan, if you are ready to present.
Cool. Yeah, I can do that. Hang on.
I love that we always see Brendan's view out his window, not Brendan. It's a very zen moment. Yes, thank you.
I laptop is docked, that sort of thing.
That's all good. I just look at it as calming, relaxing. I miss the Pacific Northwest. Demo, yay.
I'll move over so that you can see 520 and I'll make you feel better.
No thanks.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Yep. All right, so I wanted to demo some integrations I've been working on with Visual Studio Code. If you haven't checked it out, I find it to be a kind of fun editor in the sort of.
And it's free.
And it's free, and it works everywhere, and it's sort of in the Sublime sort of camp, I guess, in terms of integrations and stuff like that.
Brendan, I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm hearing a company man make such a transition when we know you're Vim for life. So stop.
I was never a Vim person, so and actually this is great for Go, honestly. Like the Golang integration is actually pretty sweet. But that's that. So, but I've been working on some ideas around how we can do better integration between the development environment and Kubernetes in particular, because I don't think that there really is a cloud development environment that's particularly good. And so this is that. So we start out, I have some Node.js code here, a really simple function. And I have a Kubernetes cluster up and running. And so I can start by saying, like, you know what, I've heard about this Kubernetes thing. I'd kind of like to try it out. Let's just go ahead and run it. All right, and so it's in the background, it's building the Docker image. You can see that there's the Docker file over here. It's pushed it, it's created a deployment. So I'm sort of like, well, that's kind of interesting. What is this deployment thing that I've heard of? And so I can actually say Kubernetes describe, and I'll say deployments node simple, which is the deployment that I just created. And now down here, I've actually got the output of the describe, so I'm integrating the experience there. But I may actually want to move beyond that and actually start thinking about the Kubernetes API objects themselves. So I can actually say Kubernetes load, and I want to load deployments, node simple. And what this is actually going to do is it's going to go off, and it actually went to the server, pulled down the JSON object, and now in my editor I have the complete JSON object. But of course, this is kind of complicated, and so I don't really necessarily understand exactly what's going on. So I can actually say Kubernetes explain, and this is integrating. I have to save here. This is integrating the explain API that's present in kubectl, so that we can actually go and say, like, well, what does this do over here? And if I hover over, I get a tooltip that shows me what this field does, or the spec. If I hover over, I get a tooltip that describes the spec object to me. And so now I may want to do something like scale this thing up. So we'll take replicas, and we'll say I want that to be 3 replicas. So we'll say Kubernetes apply. And at this point, it kicks up a diff for me, right? So it's showing me it's gone to the server, it's pulled down the server-side version of the object over here, it's got my version of the object over here, and so it's showing me the diff of what I'm actually going to apply when I do this apply. And so if I choose to apply this change, you can say, yes, let me apply that. And it's configured and it's updated that. So 3 replicas are starting up. And now if I want to understand better, I can actually say Kubernetes git. And you'll notice this time around, it didn't prompt me for what object I wanted to get, and that's because I'm contextualized here in this object. And it shows that. And I can see the 3 replicas that are now up and running. And I wanted to show one of the other recent integrations with this. So I'll do that to the trash. Which is actually we now have live debugging support. And so if I actually do Kubernetes debug, it's actually building, it's going to build the image again, build and push. And now I say, what do I want to run? Because obviously the command that I give by default in the image isn't going to be the command that I need for debugging. So I can say no debug start.js. All right. Here. And it's going to wait for that command. So now if you see in the background here, I'm actually here in the debugger. And so I have a service that's up and running that exposes this. And if I hit reload over here, you're going to see, well, it can't contact. It doesn't know about this thing. And that's because I haven't started the program, right? It's in the debugger, but it's stopped. It's not actually executing any of the code. So we can actually insert some breakpoints over here, press play. So now the server is actually running. If I go back over to my web browser and hit reload, you can see it's spinning in the background over here, but it's not actually doing anything because I'm at this breakpoint right now. And so now if I step over that breakpoint, I step over this breakpoint where it's actually going to write some output, you can see that in the background there, that actually finished execution. So now I'm actually debugging a live server that's running out on my Kubernetes cluster, brought back to my debugger here. And then the final piece of the integration that you have here is if we go back, we can actually also expose this as a service. So I can actually just say Kubernetes expose. It's going to ask me, oh, sorry, I need to reopen that.
This is being described in chat as awesome, straight up magic. This is cool. Ooh, you're getting all sorts of excitement.
Reopen that deployment that I had. Now if I actually say Kubernetes expose, we go ahead and the service has been exposed, and now there's actually a service that's been defined. I can externalize that service if I want to. I can pull down that object. So this is out there. You can actually go and install this in the extension now. It's out on GitHub as well if you're interested in hacking on this with me. So that's about all there is to it. So thanks so much.
Can you drop a link? How do we get this? Yeah.
Links everywhere.
Yep. There's one question. Why 2 steps to the explain API? Shouldn't we do that automatically?
Did we lose Brendan?
Maybe he left.
I can't hear anyone. I don't know if anybody else can hear anyone.
I can't hear him. I think he might have left. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Brendan, you can't hear us? Interesting.
Oh, well, we will, I guess we will follow up offline and get the links put into the, oh yeah.
You.
Okay, well, while we were waiting for that, we can move on to SIG updates. We have 2, Contributor Experience Working Group and SIG Auth. Do you want to kick us off, Garrett?
Sure. So for Contribex, on Monday, we launched the approvers mechanism. I think there's been an issue open. Brian went back and tracked it since maybe 2 years ago, 2015, to get approvers working, or to expand the owner's files. And with a lot of help from Caleb, from Antoine, from Ihor, all over the place, we drove it to completion. The names I'm missing, but it was a huge effort. The way that it works, I think, is detailed in the link in the agenda. So each file in a PR will need to be approved. There are approvers files throughout the directory. I've sent the discussion out. But if you have questions, reach out to the Contributor Experience Working Group or reach out to me directly, and definitely with feedback as well. I've been getting feedback pretty quickly and trying to keep a really tight loop and fixing things or updating features as people use it more and more. So thanks everybody for that. Now that that's kind of released, it's obviously a work in progress, but some of the other things that we'd like to focus on is making sure that it has the intended effect. And one of the metrics that we're looking to track is how many people are reviewing code. Are we expanding the reviewer pool? And overall, we'd like to, speed up throughput, right? The overall goal is to get, as the number of contributors grow, to make sure that the velocity of the project's increasing as well. So there are things out there. There are a number of dashboards that exist already. So some of the work is going to be around unifying the dashboards. There are things like Kubernetes, which can show individual contributors how many PRs they have open. There are things like Velodrome, which looks at metrics surrounding time to LGTM or time to approve. There's the submit queue, which has kind of the merge rate. So some of the goals is going to be to get all of those kind of in one place, or at least make it easier to get the relevant information. And the second kind of big task for Contribex is to start tackling the 4,000 plus issues that are open in the repo. We've heard lots of different strategies, and we're talking about in the meeting. Some of them are, some of them are going to be helped quite a bit by the new GitHub teams having finer grained GitHub teams. So you'll see now there are things like SIG node test infra or SIG node issue triage rather than just a SIG node. So things can be routed more clearly, and as the labels get updated as well. I guess all of these are strategies that we're looking at to address the many open issues in the repo right now.
And to bounce back just a moment to approvers and owners and all of that tooling, this was a huge manual effort to try to figure out who the best choices were for those files, but that doesn't mean it is complete. So please put PRs in, they can then be discussed. So if you're missing someone in an approvers list, or you find an approvers list that doesn't have enough people or things aren't happening, this is an iterative process. This isn't canonically written from above that these are the only people that could be there. So please help us tune them up.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It was a process that was taking a really long time. So it's meant to be an iterative process. So we got one iteration out, add people to the approvers. Can you see the documentation on the approver list? I'm not sure what you mean by documentation. There's a link to the discussion and to the email that got sent out. If you want to see the approvers, the owner's files itself, I think there was a PR I'll look for, or an issue that was open, and I can look for it and post it in the chat. Alejandro.
Yeah, there was a big list, an issue with many PRs associated with them.
But the key point is this is a starting point for us, and we will improve it as it goes forward. I think a couple of people have asked, this is wrong. How do we, this is wrong. Why is it this way? As opposed to this is wrong. How can we fix it? The answer is you can fix it by submitting a PR and suggesting a choice, and then we will work through the varying options of higher level approvers and consensus building to make sure that we get the right people into these. But we had to put a stake in the ground and put something out there in order to get it started, because it had been almost a year in the process.
Threads in the working group, Google groups that you can reply to as well.
Yep.
We'll try to get those links added to the agenda as well.
Awesome. Yeah, more links into this community meeting doc is always helpful. Yes,
to answer to Alejandro's question, there are several threads in a contributor experience, and we'll try to get those linked in there for you. If there are not other questions, we can go to SIG Auth. And is there a representative from SIG Auth who'd like to give an update on what you're all working on for 1.6?
Yeah, this is Jordan Leggett, one of the SIG Auth leads. Let me pull this up. I wanted to update people on what we're doing with role-based access control. So in 1.6, role-based access control, which is one of the authorization methods for the API, is going to beta, and we are positioning it as the preferred authorizer. Currently, most deployments that set up authorization use ABAC, which uses a static policy file, and that's kind of hard to manage, hard to define really scoped policies, and so most deployments that use ABAC grant just broad permissions to a few users, including service accounts. Most deployments do. So in 1.6, what we're doing to enable RBAC are defining default roles for all of the control plane components and all of the controllers, as well as 4 sort of end user facing roles. And so we have documentation polls open for that. So this is what those roles will look like. You have a cluster admin, which is a super user role, then admin, edit, and view, which are appropriate to give to a user that you want to be scoped within a namespace. So an admin would let a user do stuff within their namespace, including grant permissions to other users within their namespace. An edit user could just have write permissions to things like replica sets and pods, but couldn't actually manage permissions in the namespace. And then a view role would have read-only permissions. So we're working to define these roles as well as all of the roles for the various control plane components. The second thing we're doing in 1.6 is scale testing. So KubeMark is actually running with RBAC on now, and we've gotten some good feedback there. It's not falling over, that's good. So we're just tuning some of the memory use and some of the CPU stuff, but it's looking good. The third thing we're doing is adding command line helpers and documentation like this pull request in progress. So actually in tree now are a couple of command line helpers for granting permissions, either within a namespace or across all namespaces. So you can try these out and give feedback. But it makes it really easy to say, I want to give a particular role to a particular user in a particular namespace. And that also works for groups and service accounts. And then the last thing we're doing in 1.6 is working to enable RBAC in the various deployment methods. So right now, it is running in CI. So if you use KubeUp on GCE from master, you get RBAC. KubeAtom, when deploying a 1.6 build, will enable RBAC. GKE is working to make RBAC possible to enable in 1.6. And I think I just saw something going into COPS as well. So we're working to get this enabled in all the various deployment methods we have. And then just as a last note, because RBAC policy is restrictive by default, it starts with a restrictive policy and then lets the super user who started up the cluster kind of delegate out permissions as they want. That can be disruptive to workloads that just sort of expected to have full API access by default without doing anything special. And so we have a couple upgrade strategies that we recommend. The first is if you are currently running 1.5 in like a really permissive mode and want to migrate to more scoped permissions, you can actually run RBAC and ABAC together, and RBAC will get a first shot at authorizing. And if it denies, it'll log and then hand off to the ABAC authorizer. And so you can keep your existing policy in place and not disrupt anything running on your cluster, and just look at your server logs to see what's being denied as you are trying to get your roles and permission grants set up. And then once your workloads are running without any denials, you can just remove the ABAC authorizer. So that's probably what we're going to recommend for people. There's always an escape hatch. Maybe you just don't care. You're running locally on your machine and you really don't care. You want to give everyone permission to do everything. That's still easy to do. You can grant the super user role to your user and the kubelet and all service accounts. You can replicate that permissive policy very, very easily if you want to. So that is what we have coming up in 1.6. Any questions?
There was one comment from Brandon that Tectonic uses RBAC. I didn't see anything in the chat that was about the RBAC rollout itself.
Okay, I'll throw a couple links in. So that first link is the link to the entry roles. And then this second link is the current documentation pull request that is open. All right, that's all from SIG Auth.
Cool. There was one comment from Tim St. Clair about development mode, local cluster, about defaulting to wide open permissions.
So actually, local cluster up, what we would do instead is default to making the user that you have a kube config for a super user. So that user would have full permissions, and they could then either run the command that gives super user permissions to all service accounts and do whatever, or they could carve up permissions. But we want to kind of follow the best practice of starting with like one user having super user permissions, and then that user decides what they want their cluster to look like.
Sorry, there's another comment or a question from Aaron about who owns local cluster setup. It seems to be mired in some other issues, and who's responsible for fixing that.
Local up cluster, Clayton owns it. That's funny. That's a good question. It's not exercised in any CI flows. It basically gets issues reported against it by people who use it, and that's not a great situation. So if you'd like to help, or ideally like to see it enabled in a CI job, yeah, jump into some of the issues and help out.
All right. Which SIG? Is that cluster lifecycle or cluster ops?
I might say that this would be developers, and so I don't know if it's contributor experience, but it's definitely got like the point of this cluster is to make local development easy, along with Minikube, and we should figure out a way to make those effective.
Actually, Minikube doesn't make development easy at all. I mean, like,
okay, well then I take that back. So this is
to find a way to actually say, how do I actually take my local build and make it work with Minikube? But like, I gave up after looking at that for an hour.
So it's either contributor experience or probably cluster lifecycle, or somebody who owns developers.
I understand your point, Jordan, of wanting to switch it by default. I'm just, as a number of changes have gone on within this release cycle, there have been a lot of frustrations of people using their local development environments and not being aware. And this goes to a broader topic of a group. How do we disseminate broad, sweeping bits of information so that both the community at large is aware without with having meaningful type of signal to noise ratio? Because a lot of times people will turn down the devel list or turn down some other mailing list because they're not fully aware, right? Or there's so much noise in some channels. So I just want to make sure that there isn't the 12,000 issues and WTFs that go on when sometimes these changes occur.
Yeah, just are you still talking about local up cluster, or are you talking about the broader rollout?
Local cluster up first.
Yeah, so right now, RBAC is not enabled by default in that. If you look in it, you have to opt in. If you enable RBAC, it starts in this one super user mode. So by default, local up cluster, if you just run it, it's allow everything to do everything. I think the presumption is if you want to run RBAC, then you want to exercise what RBAC gives you, which is scope permissions. So.
One thing to add to, just for general awareness issues, so in SIG cluster ops, we're trying to figure out some sort of advisory system, and that's a work in progress, and that will be to hopefully provide a meaningful way for people who are running this in production to learn about breaking changes or things that are impactful to production clusters. So if we figure out a good pattern for that, that may be something that we can apply in other realms as well, so things that impact developer space.
Okay, cool. Well, so there's, I guess, similar to that, there's a new, brand spanking new mailing list, Kubernetes Dev Announce, hyphens between those words, at googlegroups.com, presumably for the dissemination of this kind of information that should have very high signal to noise ratio. Should really only be announcements that are of this kind of nature.
So I just did a quick search on Google Groups for that, and I wasn't able to find it. Can we drop a link into that? Because I'm concerned that it might have been created inside one of the company.
Yes, we
Thanks,
can.
Caleb.
Yeah, I'll follow up with that offline. Well, I guess we can move on to what would be the meat for our last 30 minutes here. The governance.md, 3 branches proposal, and Bob's notes on governance afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you for the link, Brian. I don't know why I couldn't.
It looks like Eric Toon is busy typing in something for Sig Apps. I don't know if that's a Sig update that's supposed to go in, or Eric?
Well, we'll follow up.
I've successfully unmuted. I wasn't clear on whether or not I was supposed to give an update, but I started formulating one in case I need to. But if anyone else wants to go first, that's fine. Or I can go.
Yeah, you can have what you go.
Okay. In progress, we have someone working on stateful set bug fixes and generally auditing the code, and found some corner cases that will be fixed in 1.6. Like, for example, if you have 2 failures in a 5 instance stateful set, then it can get blocked from reconciling versus where it would have worked if there was just 1 failure. We're moving all the annotations that are needed by stateful set. Various people are moving them to beta. Init containers is GA, which makes it much prettier to write a stateful set. Several people are working on design and implementation for daemon set updates. And I expect that in 1.6, you'll be able to update a daemon set for daemon sets that don't require machine drains, that can tolerate a brief downtime. There's a number of deployment improvements under review or recently completed. Across all controllers, we're improving, making sure we use controller ref and have sane adoption logic, and we avoid overlapping controller problems. We're in the area of charts. We have 53 charts in stable now. I just checked and I was shocked at how many there are. And most of them are things I've heard of too. A couple are not. And we're working on integration testing at Kubernetes head so that stable charts are checked against head Kubernetes. So if we break, a controller, we'll know about it with real applications rather than just made up integration tests. And we have a couple people focused on making sure that Spark runs well on Kubernetes, and that is testing the limits of third-party resource. That's all I can think of at the moment. I'm sure there's more.
It gives us a great overview.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Now, getting back to our governance proposals. Brian or Sarah or Bob, do you want to speak to that point?
Sarah, did you have in mind someone who should go first?
I think you and I have talked about elders and governance, so why don't we start with Bob? Does that work? And we can try to synthesize the varying, since Bob's is the newest proposal.
Sure.
Okay, Bob, are you game?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that I think we're all going to argue about who gets to go last. I think really my proposal is more of an extension to the current proposal around the Council of Elders concept. So, do you want me to keep going, or should we talk about the other first?
Can you talk about the policy committee or that you propose adding the extension? Just briefly say what it is.
Sure. Okay. So in brief, my proposal is that there are really three kind of distinct needs, constituencies, points of view, and they all need to be represented by separate groups. So I guess you could try to think of them as executive, legislative, judicial, or something like that. And the three groups are product management, which really embodies roadmaps, feature planning, release, those sorts of things. I would say classic product management roles. There's the Council of Elders, which I understand that is still in debate. And I think there is a view that that is all sort of like a appeal to Caesar kind of group. I would hope that that is a bit more active in terms of determining technical architecture and direction. So really, in the normal corporate pattern, that would be CTO, design architecture, and I think having those two groups is really critical. Projects. This is just a well-known pattern in software engineering of teams that are feature-oriented tend to build fragile architectures and get stovepipes. Teams that are exclusively architecture design-oriented tend to produce features that customers don't want and have poor user experiences. But I think especially for a large open source project with lots of parties in it, there's a third leg to the stool, and the third leg to the stool is project policy. Really shouldn't be involved in making either of those other decisions, but really should be fundamentally empowered to set the rules around transparency and roles and worry about the organizational bits. At present, the decision making around that is a bit of a mishmash. Some of it's coming from the PM group, some of it's coming from the developer experience group, and I really feel like we need to formalize it. I think in the large nonprofit world, the notion of a project policy board of some sort is pretty well understood as best practice. So at any rate, that's my proposal. That's why I describe it as an extension from the Council of Elders. I think that there's been a bit of thrashing around on project policy issues, and rapid change in that can be really necessary on the one hand for productivity, but can also be really damaging to morale and productivity around the group as well. And it needs to be treated like a first-class citizen. There you go. It's in the PR. I think the PR is noted there. Thanks
so like this is the super user role because it can change all the rules?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It sounds like this role can like change the product policy. So I don't see how that, or the project policy, so it can rewrite the rules. So I guess it's, how is it balanced against the other two roles?
I think that can you hear me? I can't
Yes.
tell my mic. Okay. I think that is where the community writ large comes to play, right? I mean, I think that this is, at the end of the day, this is a democracy. And if we make enough people mad, they're just going to fork and go someplace else, or they're going to stop contributing, right? So I think that there's a natural counterbalance to all of this, which is that everybody is here more or less voluntarily. And so I don't see that as being a concern, Eric, because I see this being more about the project-wide policy, not the meta policy, if you will, right? Not the policy for the policy.
Yeah, I think
policy for
the policy for the policy is the kind of stuff that's in governance.md. That should be decided by a different group. I totally agree that we need people actively working on improving the process of the project. I think the biggest gap isn't that there isn't a group blessed with, with that explicit authority, but that we don't actually have enough people helping. Both the PM group and the contributor experience groups have been trying to make it better, but we need actually more people thinking about it, working on it, moving it forward. I do agree that there should be an explicit group of people who make the final decision and help roll out those processes. So I think, roughly it's sort of in the right direction. It's a good idea.
And there's also...
I would say, actually, just to comment on that quickly, I actually don't think that the stuff that's in governance is sufficient here. I know Joe wants to talk too, but I don't think the stuff that's in governance here is sufficient because it is very kind of, I would say, tactical at some level. It doesn't have a lot to do, it has a lot to do with how you do an individual thing or an individual piece and various rotations and stuff like that. There's very little of the, how do we make a project-wide decision? Because I don't see a lot.
One meta issue that I'd want to bring up here real quick, and then I think Craig has something too. What is the project here? Because I think one of the things that we've talked about again and again is actually scoping down the core to be something that's more tractable and essentially done, right? If we can do that, if we can make the scope of the sort of the decisions that need to be made smaller, then it's going to be easier to federate this stuff out and actually have people own the experience across the different components. And so this was Clayton, there's going to be some stuff that's going to actually cut across the larger project, and then there's going to be some stuff that's concentrated on sort of like sub projects. And so maybe if we can find ways to sort of scope this stuff down, it'll be easier to not need these sort of wide things. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I think maybe that'll give some folks some confidence on this stuff.
So one observation here, and this is just I sometimes geek on this stuff a little bit, and often when a project reaches a threshold of the sort of scope that we have, we start to struggle with some systematic issues. And a lot of the response is to create net new roles, net new functions, and do relatively bold, top-level systematic changes to try to address, some of the shortcomings. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. The thing that I would implore folks to think about as we start to chew off this definition of this new class of role is rather than trying to sort of a priori establish it as like hey, we're gonna introduce this new board, they're gonna be empowered, their charter is to go and rethink the way that everything works. Let's chew off something really, really small, really short terms, and set like a small window on it, and see if we can do something that just creates incremental value first, as a sort of dating process before we try to get married with a new way to think about role of governance, etc. So if there's something within this project that we can chew off as a discrete, this is an obvious pain point. Let's try to get a really elegant, simple, system in place to define policy around this pain point. It'll give us a step forward. And I agree that long term we need to figure out much broader things like is there an elders group? Do we have that sort of appointed, or is it voted? How does this all sort of work? But I just don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I would say, if we want to create something with policy, let's focus on a simple policy problem that is everyone agrees to, is obvious, is right in front of us. Let's set a 2-week timeline on it, and let's come back to this group with a solution. We see how it works.
So, Greg,
go ahead.
Did we lose Bob?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to react to that. So I'm definitely sensitive to the notion that what I'm proposing here sounds like a bunch more process and bureaucracy that's all new. But what I'm really trying to do is formalize a whole bunch of ad hoc stuff that's going on and running around the project right now, and decisions being made in a less than transparent fashion, changes that are affecting the entire project being rolled out without really transparency or proper notice. This is really bad for morale. So what I'm really trying to do is just put a little bit of structure around things that are going on in the project right now. If I were to make a proposal, an incremental proposal here, it would be that maybe you can even view it as like citizens watchdog group or something is kind of a first step, which is just make sure that any any changes that are going to affect the project are just following some basic rules around notification and notice and transparency, and making sure things are documented, and have they actually gone into this meeting for discussion? Have they put on the developer list?
I want to comment on it. I agree with what Craig said, because I understand that feedback about transparency and communication, but we also need to acknowledge reality, that doing those decisions and defining those policies is really time consuming, right? And if you will look on, for example, on the Contribex Experience Working Group, that group exists for a very long time, and not many volunteer to be part of it. And I think that this is how the community tried to make it transparent, right? So if one wants to know what were the processes or to impact or to change things, that would be the place. And I am also concerned about creating teams and organizations that people that are not in that closed group will know how to impact, right? So talking about transparency, it's transparency for the entire community, that's one. And also from what I've seen, even with the elders, all those big things and governance that we want to build will require a lot of time from people. And I would prefer to try it first in a smaller policy creation and see that people have the time and the attention to give it, because otherwise there will be a policy or a governance board or whatever, but nothing will actually come out of it. And that would be my concern, because I really want to see us moving forward.
I think that the challenge here is that two things. One is that we continue to make these decisions, right? We decided to add Bazel, which basically, as far as I can tell, just adds a step to my pre-commit scripts. We're deciding to break up the source code repository, which we've had a big discussion about, and we never reached a conclusion on, right? We are, we make a lot of these decisions in ad hoc ways with very poor sightlines and very bad accountability. And I think that the challenge is we made it all distributed, right? We made a contributor working group, and we made all of these different little sub working groups, which works in those scopes when the scope of those groups is clearly understood. There are these things that cross cut, and then what happens is these cross-cutting decisions are made in these small groups with relatively poor visibility unless you're tightly in that group. And I think that's the concern that Bob is expressing. I think Craig's proposal to practice is a decent one. We may as well, but I worry that we'll get back in that same loop of making one small decision without getting a broader process in place to address all of the future decisions that we might make.
You're right. I mean, the thing that I would argue is, like, let's find a hotspot right now as a community. And if it's like if it's, I don't know where, like, the most the most long lead impacting decisions are being made. Like, pick one of the SIGs that's actually doing terraforming work. And let's focus on, like, let's have people step into that SIG and actually start to establish best practices, right? So when we make a decision, we need to get into a habit of communicating that decision. So how is that decision actually communicated? Well, we probably need to have, there's a bunch of existing communication mechanisms. Let's try using them. Let's make sure that it's documented. Like, where's it documented? Well, let's just write it down. We can step back and try to create more process and more structure, but at some point, if you're not already adhering to the process or the obvious processes that exist, like, it spirals out of control. So my belief is that we should identify a hotspot, just one hotspot as a group. Let's say, like, we as a group are no longer tolerant of this SIG, making blah, blah, whatever it is, right? And then let's, like, focus on that, and let's just, like, clean house. Let's step in there. Let's make sure that the organizational structure makes sense. Let's make sure that we communicate decisions, that the scope is appropriate. And that was the set of best practices. It'll either work or it won't. If it works, that's great. We take it to another SIG. And say, these are the best practices we established from the SIG. It worked really well. This is what worked, this is what didn't. We've learned a lot. We've treated it as a professional undertaking. And, I'm very nervous of, in my earlier career, I used to geek on a lot of, like, large or sort of stuff like that. And I'm really worried about having to introduce a forced overlay process. It's not hard to find a process that will work. It's the actual community acceptance of the process and introducing it into the workflow that's the hard problem. And so I'm a much bigger fan of kind of bottoms up. So, I'll shut up.
Sorry,
if I could
I think you both are saying. Oh, sorry, Brendan, go ahead.
I just wanted to say to Craig, I'm totally in favor, and I think that, but I think we need to make sure that it is a decision that is above the level of the SIG, because I think that the SIG stuff actually is working pretty well.
Yes.
I think it's the stuff where it's like, this is community-wide, this impacts everyone where we do a poor job. And so I think if we identify one of those and we go through it and we survey effectively at the end, like, how happy are you as a community with this process? That'll be a great signal that we're doing it right. So I think that's a great way to do it. But we should make sure that it's not small tactical. It's
I agree with you.
outside of any one SIG.
So
I
as
think
an
you both are saying.
example, I'm going to stop for a second and jump in. So as an example, where we are having problems is not this. We've done very well with subsidiarity. If it is scoped within your SIG, the SIGs are making decisions that is working really cleanly. Taking anything that we want to change across multiple SIGs or across the whole project is the pain point. So we don't have small things so much that we can change. Although, to be fair, Aaron keeps bringing up and is awesome about this. The way we implemented two-factor authentication on GitHub worked really well. We talked about it in the community meeting for multiple weeks. Not necessarily discussing it, but making it as a notice. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It's coming for these reasons. It was documented. It was sent to the Kubernetes dev mailing list. It was reminded that it was going to come in 3 weeks. Here was then everyone who was going to be affected immediately because they hadn't put on 2FA was then contacted, I think, 3 times. Thank you, Eric Paris, for the pain on that. And then we still screwed up in a slight way in that we didn't notify all the people in Kubernetes Incubator that were going to be affected. So, but we've learned from this, so I think taking those and trying to figure out what the best practices are around establishing a new process, which is slightly different, because I don't think anybody argued we didn't want 2FA. And that's the difference here, is why that one worked, for me, why that one worked well is nobody needed to say, no, we really do need to do that.
All right, I'm really sorry. I have to go give a talk right now, so I'm just going to finish this. I think actually, Brendan, if I could propose, Brendan and Craig are actually saying the exact same thing in slightly different ways. Craig is, in my opinion, my vote is closer to Craig. Like, I am worried about instituting process without, like, at least vetting it some way. But Brendan's point is extremely valid. Like, solving this at a SIG level is not the problem we're trying to solve. We are trying to solve two or more SIGs who may have somewhat conflicting issues and need a third authority figure, vote, whatever, to help resolve that issue. And so all I would propose is I think we could maybe solve this by picking 2 SIGs that do have some degree of overlap and attempting a proposal around that. And then I'll take off. Thanks, everyone.
I'd say I can maybe the greatest example I can think of this kind of issue here. And I don't really think this is cross-SIG kinds of things. It is more project-wide. So, for example, coming up to this discussion around the governance doc, we had a debate, and the debate was around. And by the way, this pattern, this is just one example. The pattern was we're going to put a whole bunch of discussion and content into a Google Doc. And a whole bunch of the conversation around the community is going to be restricted to a subset of the community around the doc. And then eventually, when it gets more baked, it's going to get moved into a PR where it's actually in the open for a wider portion of the community to...
Bob, why do you think the Google Doc is not open? Like, it's shared with Kubernetes Dev and Kubernetes PM?
I've seen this happen in other cases. Maybe that was a poor example, but we did have a debate around, hey, like the standard way to do this kind of thing on the project is to put it in a PR. There was a bunch of debate around, well, the features kind of suck. And there was also debate about, can you or can you not actually see the project history? So are we really providing transparency around the comment stream? And I'm really not, Brian, this is exactly the point I was trying to make around the project policy thing, which it isn't really the job of the project policy team to make that decision as to what's the right tool set. That's probably a recommendation from someone else, but it really ought to be clear what the project policy is and communicate it, and then really work to make sure that everybody's doing it the same way.
Right.
Okay, so I mean,
sorry.
just here. So I think, you know, two things real quick. Number one, Google people need to start creating Google Docs with their Gmail account, not with the Google account, because I shared it with Kubernetes Dev, and then you open it with the wrong account is really annoying. If it's public, it's public. You need to start doing that. Second thing is that there are some SIGs that are just by their nature tilt towards doing project-wide things. And I think I'm thinking of like API machinery. It's just very difficult for API machinery to do anything that doesn't impact a ton of people. I think we need to be very aware of the fact that you know, those things are by necessity going to have to actually move slower and get more buy-in, because they do actually impact so many more people. And we can't turn those particular SIGs in terms of sort of like cabals that get to make things and make decisions unilaterally. And so it's just something, and that's not necessarily cross SIG, that's just the nature of some of those SIGs.
Yeah, I think building on this like consensus thing, I think also SIG API machinery is a good one to figure out whether the Git decision is working out well. They're having to build a lot of automation and stuff around pulling client out. And do we know, have we gotten good feedback on whether that's successful?
So, sorry to stifle the discussion here, but we are bumping up against the end of this meeting. It sounds like things are still yet unresolved. So I would propose talking about this in possibly a focused meeting, or if we could break it out of a topic out of the contributor experience working group, if that sounds good for people. Okay, we got one vote for breakout, another vote for breakout. Okay, great. Well,
so then I think we need to announce it to Kubernetes Dev and make it an open breakout single topic discussion, because if we make this, you know, just 6 people, then we're going to have the same problem again.
Yep, sounds good. So do we want to set as an action item, setting something to our new, giving probably a day or so for people to join Kubernetes Dev -announce. And then by Monday or Tuesday morning Pacific time, sending out a invite to a separate breakout meeting. Can we have a volunteer to own that?
I can do it.
Who is that?
Brendan. Not Brandon.
Okay.
Brendan, not Brandon, yes, B.
Okay, fantastic. We
Although
will do
Brendan can volunteer Brandon for things and vice versa, which is actually quite amusing when it happens.
Just so that I'm clear on what I volunteered for, was to advertise it to Kubernetes Dev announce. And,
yes, to set up
a survey or something for scheduling, so we can try and find the place that works for most people.
And for the short term, we should probably advertise it on Kubernetes Dev with a note that this kind of thing is going to happen on Kubernetes Announce. You should join it.
Right, and also likewise, I think the suggestion around 2FA about how we talked about it several times in community meeting beforehand is a good idea, because I think many people don't hit every community meeting.
Well, actually, I think it's good to mention things in the community meeting, but the community meeting doesn't reach a lot of people. We've had complaints about talking things here, especially for people in non-American time zones. Like, roughly speaking, I don't know how many people watch the video, but only on the order of a few dozen people attend this meeting. So we really need to use the announce list.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying any and all, not just that. Try and hit all the different places where people pay attention.
And Brian, we have between 50 and 70 people attend this meeting each week, and we have between 200 and 800 watch the video over the next 3 weeks. So this is actually a decent tool for us, but I do agree that it has to go into email, announce lists, and the meeting as well.
And it might be good to start just doing a TLDR on these things. I'm happy enough to help out with that.
Just to calibrate, Kubernetes Dev has 1,200 members. So.
Okay, great. Well, we are out of time on this meeting. Thank you all so much. And just for those interested in the last discussion, look for the announcement on Tuesday Pacific time.
And welcome to the Heptio office for the first time. Wave.
We're still in Madrona. We're moving up the block in next week. So come visit us.
We'll welcome you from the new office next time.
Later.
Bye.